Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be welcoming you to our 7th roundtable with Dr. Jennifer Hall, class of 89 on the entrepreneurial mindset. We really appreciate you taking your busy schedule to join us today. As we all know, this event is organized by Trinity Entrepreneurial Network. The Bantam Spirit has always been an entrepreneurial one. Within our alumni body, we're proud to have many successful and aspiring entrepreneurs of all ages and in every career field. The Trinity Entrepreneurial Network provides a dedicated space for Trinity entrepreneurs to connect with each other and with current students. So for more information, please contact Melissa Bronzino Regan, and please check the chat for Melissa's email address. She'll put it there. So today's program is a part of a monthly series roundtable conversations with Trinity entrepreneurs on the topic of interest to fellow entrepreneurs. I have a few housekeeping notes and announcements to make before we begin today's program. During Dr. Jennifer's presentation, we recommend that you set your view to speaker view and then switch it to gallery view for our Q&A session. Please make sure that you're muted throughout Dr. Jennifer's presentation. Also, we will record this program, so if you're not comfortable, you can just turn off your camera.
Time is precious, so thank you for taking your time to be here today. And I would like this to be very interactive. So I'll tell you just a little bit about my own entrepreneurial journey, as it were, and then I will present to you the research that some colleagues and I did to create this assessment of entrepreneurial mindset. We have a poll. I'm going to ask some questions, but also feel free to chime in at any time you like. You can just unmute yourself and talk, or you can raise your hand, and Etsuv and I will be looking for you, as will be Melissa, who is the organizer of this and kind of behind the scenes. So yeah, thanks. So as Etsuv said, I graduated in the class of 89, and there's a few of you, it looks like, from that time period. In some ways, it feels like the 3 decades or so that was, and in some ways, it feels like it was just yesterday. So really quickly, my story is, after I graduated with a psych degree from Trinity, I went right to grad school at University of Connecticut, where I crossed paths with Eve, who is on the call, but her camera is off. And I got a PhD in clinical psychology. I thought I wanted to be a professor for the rest of my life. And I got a job at a small liberal arts college in St. Pete, Florida. That's how I ended up there, Doug, called Eckerd College. And after 5 years of teaching, I actually quit my tenure track job. People thought I was crazy, quit my tenure track job, and I launched an executive coaching line of business for an intern. It was internal to the college. It was a revenue producing arm of the college called the Leadership Development Institute, or LDI. LDI happened to be affiliated with a global leadership development firm called the Center for Creative Leadership, or CCL. Has anyone heard of CCL or been through a CCL program at all? They're headquartered in Greensboro, but they have campuses in Colorado Springs and San Diego, Brussels, Singapore. No, okay, I don't see any nods or see any raised hands. But luckily for me, I got to learn from CCL, and I was affiliated with CCL in various ways for the next 15 years. And we were some of the first folks to be doing executive coaching, because at that point, our programs were just leaders came from around the world. They took all these assessments and they went through these experiential activities and they learned about themselves. And then there was a feedback session with a coach like me at the end of the program. But until then, there was no ongoing executive coaching. So that's what I quit my job to start, was an executive coaching line of business. And in those programs, because we always used assessments, we would choose our assessments based on the needs of the leader, their goals, the reason they were being sent for coaching. And several years into my tenure there, one of my colleagues who was a coach asked me if I knew of any assessments of entrepreneurial mindset, because she thought that entrepreneurial mindset was not just for founders and business owners, but it was also helpful for corporate leaders. And those were the folks we served, those were our clients. And I looked and I couldn't find one. And she looked and she couldn't find one. And so we decided to build one. I took some courses at Trinity College with Sharon Herzberger on assessment. I took a bunch more in graduate school. And I thought, well, how hard can this be? But I imagine a lot of you are entrepreneurs. And so you're probably familiar with the saying that if an entrepreneur knew ahead of time how hard something would be, they probably wouldn't have done it. So sometimes a little blind optimism helps. So it took a lot longer than I anticipated to build this valid and reliable assessment, but I did. And a few years into that research, after the assessment became commercially available, I actually recognized that I had some strengths in entrepreneurial thought and action. I had never recognized that before. I come from a family of math teachers, engineers, people who get jobs and they keep them for all of their lives. And so that's kind of what I expected to do. And so I didn't really have a mental model for what it was like to be an entrepreneur, business owner, entrepreneurially minded until I did this research. So lo and behold, about 7 years ago, I quit my last salary job. And I've been running my own leadership development and coaching business ever since. So let me share with you a little bit about our research and this assessment. And as I do that, if you have any questions, you can feel free to let me know. Okay, so I'm going to put this in presentation mode. Can everybody see this now? Okay, so let me tell you something that if you are not on Zoom calls as much as I am, and you probably are, but if you're not, you may not know this, but there is a way that you can split your screen. So you see the presentation on one side and you see the video, whether it's just me or the gallery view on the other side. And what you would do on the top of your screen, you should see you are viewing Jennifer Hall's screen, something like that. And there's a drop-down menu on the right of that. And if you click on that little downward caret, you should see a bunch of options. And one of them says view split screen. So if you want, you can click on that. And now you can see the whole presentation and the video separately. And if you want to resize either one, you can just put your mouse between the presentation on the line, the vertical line between the presentation and the videos, and drag it left or right to size it how you want. Okay, so hopefully that was new to someone, so you've learned something today. If you learn nothing else, then we've done some good. Okay, so let me ask you this. For whom is entrepreneurial mindset important? I think that you're at various stages in your careers, and some of you are even students, I believe. I know some students signed up. So for whom is this important? And I'm going to now just stop sharing so I can hear from some of you. For whom is this important? Obviously entrepreneurs, right? But anyone else?
I would say everyone.
Everyone, Dave. Okay, great. Why do you say that, Dave? I happen to agree, but why do you think that?
Because I think, certainly my different experience, I've had entrepreneurial experience, I've had Fortune 500 large company experience, and in every role I've done, there's always responsibilities and projects and work you need to do that requires a lot of entrepreneurial thinking and coming up with new ideas and ways of doing things, and just a mentality that you're dealing with something new that someone else hasn't dealt with and you need to try to figure it out. So
nice. Okay, so you've already mentioned a few aspects of what we measure when we look at entrepreneurial mindset: generating new ideas, kind of that curiosity, trying to figure things out, looking at problems as opportunities. Actually, we don't measure all of that, but we measure some of that, and I do think all of that is involved. So thanks, Dave. Who else? How about students? Is it important or helpful for students to operate with an entrepreneurial mindset? Or not? I have to admit, I was not entrepreneurial in college. Doug?
Sure. So, well, I'm a neuroscientist at a biotech company. And I think we're very entrepreneurial in our approaches to the development of novel therapeutics. But if I can just turn the table on you just for a second, can you define entrepreneurial?
I love that you asked that, Doug, because
there's a financial aspect to, I think, the definition as well. But then there's a very innovative side of it. So I just wonder
so it's a great question.
balance those. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm asking you a question without defining my construct, right? Because we all define constructs differently. And when I was in grad school, I worked with a guy named Julian Roeder, who is very well known in the psychology world. Eve, you probably took some classes with him, right? And Julian Roeder, who coined the term locus of control, which some of you, if anyone has studied psychology, you've heard of that. But he used to always say, you have to define your construct, because if you don't define the term, then people assume you mean something you don't. We all define things differently. And the example he always gave was, two people are in love. He says, I love you. She says, I love you back. And they could be talking about two different things. So what are we talking about in terms of entrepreneurial mindset? We're talking about part of the universe, not all of it. So let me actually bring up the presentation now and explain to you just how we define that. So thank you for that, Doug. Or let me bring back the definition.
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, there's so many things that go, oops, I'm not actually sharing, I'm just opening myself. There's so many things that go into who becomes a successful entrepreneur, who's innovative within a company, right? Who's what you might call an intrapreneur. And then you can look at the financial results. There's lots and lots of different aspects we can look at. And we know that there are organizational contributors to innovation. We know that there are product market fits that determine who's going to be financially successful, and there are leadership elements. This is a little bit dated now, a 2012 Deloitte study, but they found that organizations that considered themselves, that defined themselves, identified themselves as entrepreneurial, had better financial results than companies that did not. Now, that might be a bit of a chicken and egg thing. So when we looked at entrepreneurial mindset, and I worked with a colleague of mine who's really just, I call him the brains behind the whole outfit. He's a full-time professor and studies social psychology, and he's the psychometric expert. When his name is Mark Davis, when we went to develop this assessment, we did not start with a theoretical approach. We didn't say, here's what we believe entrepreneurial mindset is, based on a particular theory. We took a very empirical approach, but it was very clear, looking at the research that had been done at that time, that it's not a single dimension, right? That entrepreneurial mindset is not a single dimension. So we can't say you either have it or you don't, yes or no, you should or should not become an entrepreneur, but rather there are many aspects of it. And we were looking particularly at more kind of psychological skills-based characteristics. We weren't looking at, say, financial savvy or particular experience. We were looking at the things that we would call the psychological aspects. And we were looking at the constellation of both traits and abilities. So we can assess this in entrepreneurs and leaders and even in college students. Some people have tried now to assess it in high school students. We didn't create it with that in mind, so I'm not sure how it's worked, but this was how we thought of it. Now here's a poll. So I need all of you, if you can, you don't even have to turn your cameras on, although I'd love to see more of your faces, but I am hoping you will answer this poll. So I'm going to stop sharing and launch the poll. And the question is, are entrepreneurs born or made, or both? Let me launch it. And so you can interpret that however you want. I'll give you a couple minutes to answer it. Entrepreneurs are born, made, or some of each. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to end the poll now. It's okay. So 88% of you have participated. Awesome. So here are the poll results. I'm going to share them with you. So 94%. Can you see these? Because I can't
Yes.
see what you're saying. Okay, so 94% of you said some of each, a little nature, a little nurture. Awesome. And one of you said they are born. And it's typical in most presentations, like one or two people will say they're born, one or two people will say they're made. If we had any entrepreneurship educators in here, I can almost guarantee we would have at least one vote for they are made, because that's what they spend their life trying to do. And so they feel pretty passionate about it. Okay, can I, you don't have to say if you don't want, but I am curious about who said they are born and what the rationale was for that. Anyone care to?
Yes, Jennifer, that was me.
Okay,
I chose born because I've tried to fit in corporate environments and regular jobs. It just doesn't work.
Thank you for saying that, Kirti. And I'm not surprised to hear that. The people who select that option usually are the people who say, I could not be an entrepreneur if I tried. And in fact, many like you have said, and I have tried and it didn't work. I have no choice. So you can recognize that you are kind of born to do that, yes, and that can influence your answer. It turns out, though, that there are, at least according to the research that we've done, there are lots of contributors to entrepreneurial mindset. And someone who is very high on all or many of those contributors essentially can't not do it. They just can't work in a corporate setting. They don't feel comfortable. They feel stymied. There's too many rules. There's too much structure. And they just feel a lot happier when they're working for themselves. There are other people, though, who are like, yeah, well, maybe it could go either way. And maybe if I find my niche or if I find something I'm passionate about. But it does turn out, according to our research, that people are born with different personality traits, right? And we can work on enhancing one's ability, and we can work on changing one's behavior, but our real strong preferences probably don't change. So there are some things that make it more likely that someone will be an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial. And then there are a lot of skills that we can learn to make it more likely that we'll be successful. So it's some of each. And we published an article on the development of this assessment several years ago, published it in Consulting Psychology Journal. And if anyone wants it, I can share it. I could post it here, but I'd be violating copyright laws. So if you just email it to me, I can share it one at a time. And my email address is I'll share it at the end, but it's also just jen@drjenhall.com. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation and show you what our research determined are the elements of entrepreneurial mindset. So one of the first things we found was that some aspects of entrepreneurial mindset appear to be relatively more hardwired. So let's take, for example, low need for structure. So entrepreneurs compared to non-entrepreneurs tend to reject structure. That is, they find it not helpful and they can find it constraining. So you can probably all recognize in yourself where your own comfort level with structure is, and you probably could challenge yourself to get a little bit comfortable outside that predisposition of yours, but you probably couldn't change it entirely by leaps and bounds. So for example, my father is a PhD in mechanical engineering. I've never met anyone who loves structure as much as my father, right? He relies on it, he needs it. And if, for example, he was born in an environment in which he could not get a salary position for whatever job reason, or let's say he lost his salary job and he had to start a business for himself, well, he could probably recognize his own desire for structure and maybe challenge himself to work outside of a highly structured environment if he had to. But what he would do as soon as he did that is he would start imposing structure. So we're not going to change too much someone's need for and comfort with structure. So that's an example of a personality characteristic. On the other hand, what we found is there are a number of elements of entrepreneurial mindset that we consider to be skills-based. And it's not 100%, right? There, you'll see when you see the scales that it's not 100%. But we do put these in a different category because we believe that these elements are more amenable to purposeful development. So for example, idea generation. Now, are some people born better brainstormers? They can just come up with a lot more novel ideas more quickly than others? Yes, but we can also train people on some brainstorming and idea generation techniques so that they really can move the needle even more on that dimension than on the personality dimensions. Right? So I forgot to say, but you may have already realized that because we didn't start from a theoretical approach, we used an empirical approach. So we said, well, we don't know what entrepreneurial mindset is. The research at that time was not, it hadn't come to any kind of consensus on what entrepreneurial mindset is. So what we did is we created scales to measure a number of dimensions that we thought, based on research and our doing interviews with a lot of successful entrepreneurs, might differentiate entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs. So we created these psychometrically sound scales, and then we administered them to a norm group of entrepreneurs and a norm group of corporate managers, and whichever dimensions did in fact significantly differentiate between the two groups, those were included in our assessment, and we collectively refer to that constellation as entrepreneurial mindset. And here are the results. So 7 personality scales and 7 skill scales. Also, I wanted to let you know, and Etsu, I hope you would be kind enough to post this again in the chat, but early on, I posted a list of these 14 scales along with their definitions, because again, people can define things differently. So if you have access to a printer, I would love if you could print that now. If not, don't worry about it. Hopefully you have a piece of paper that you can jot down some notes on, because I want you to engage in a little reflective activity about these scales and where you might stand. Thank you, Etsu. Before we do that though, I would just like to hear your thoughts about these 14 dimensions. And I wish I could see you all and share my screen, but I can't. I do not, as a presenter, I do not have the same ability that you all do to make the video screen as big as I want. So does anyone have a question about why is this dimension in that category, or any other questions at all that you have when you look at these dimensions? Do they kind of make sense to you? Do any seem like they don't belong? Are you wondering why interpersonal sensitivity is italicized? What are your questions?
Jennifer, the one I would point out, and they all make sense, but would be perhaps nonconformity. I don't think you have to be a nonconformist to have an entrepreneurial mindset.
Okay, Scott, I'm so glad you said that, because you are absolutely right. And in fact, what our research has shown, and my anecdotal use of this assessment with hundreds of leaders and founders, is that you don't necessarily have to have any one of these things to be an entrepreneur, right? So what these 14 scales represent are the dimensions that on average differentiate entrepreneurs from non-entrepreneurs, right? And so I know a lot of successful entrepreneurs who are low on nonconformity. It's just that on average, entrepreneurs are higher. And so one thing that's so fun is working with really successful entrepreneurs, looking at their profiles and finding out that most of them, I would say, Scott, are low on several, right? There's no one ideal profile for an entrepreneur that our research has uncovered. And in fact, it looks like to us that there are many, many ways to be entrepreneurial. And this is why I think it can be so empowering to understand where your unique skill sets are, personality characteristics and skill sets that can position you to be successful within a particular context. So for example, I have a client, I've worked with him for many years. He started a fresh food company before everyone else did, and he's low on nonconformity. It's not important to him to seem different or unusual, which is what the items measure. That's not important. He's also low, though, on self-confidence and optimism. And there was one other he's really low on. Let's just say those two. Those are the two I remember. Really low on self-confidence and optimism. And I have actually done presentations to groups of entrepreneurship students, and he's been sitting in the back of the room and they don't know it. And I ask them to look at this supposedly hypothetical profile and tell me what they think. And they all say things like, maybe he'll be a good second lieutenant, second in command, but no way he's going to be a good entrepreneur. And then, in fact, he'll stand up and come to the front of the room and most people recognize his business. And it's a great demonstration of the fact that you don't need to be high on all of them or even any of them necessarily, but he is so high on passion, need to achieve, and persistence. That's his particular constellation of really standout strengths, that it doesn't matter if he doesn't feel like he's going to be able to do it. It doesn't matter if he's a pessimist. He can't not try, because he's so passionate about it, because he wants so much to succeed at high levels, and because he won't give up. So thank you for bringing that up.
I have a question.
Sure.
Does your research show that you need a preponderance of some collection of these, or is it, as your example just gave, just like supercharged on one of them? Because I look at this and think these are great, but I could say these same things about, successful CEOs who frankly are not entrepreneurs, and don't have that bone in their body.
Yeah. So Anne, great question. So our research has we haven't yet analyzed the data that looks at the relationship between the particular dimensions and financial success. That's just hard to collect that data for a lot of reasons. But so I don't know. But let me give you an example to your point about corporate leaders, right, or CEOs. And Dave, I see your hand up. I'd love to hear your question next. So I did work with a lot of them. I'm looking at the time. I did a lot of work with executives from a particular national, I guess global now, restaurant chain. And when I looked at their collective EMP scores, they were very high on action orientation, passion, need to achieve, a bunch of the skill scales. But you know where they were low? Independence. So they preferred to work within a collaborative enterprise. They were low on limited structure. They loved structure, which is good because they were making the recipes the same way around the world. They didn't get to say, oh, I think I'll do something different today. And they were very low on risk acceptance, right? So I have a feeling just intuitively that risk acceptance might be what differentiates a lot of corporate managers from a lot of entrepreneurs who are otherwise similar on the scales. But yeah, so what I do, and as a practitioner, as a coach and a leadership consultant, more so than a researcher at this point in my career, I tend to look more at individuals and understand, where are you high, where are you low? What are the implications for fit for you, right? Are you better off in an organization? Are you better off on your own? And if you go out on your own, are you better off doing like a lifestyle business where you're a solopreneur? Are you going to try a startup, high-tech startup that involves a lot of other considerations beyond entrepreneurial mindset? Or maybe you can be a franchisee because you like structure and you're not really high on independence. So there are a lot of implications of particular profiles of scores for what context and where people will be successful. But I tend to think that anyone can be successful if they pick the right endeavor and setting for their particular constellation of scores. Dave?
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at the different traits there for personality and skills, and all seem pretty obvious. Although one I was curious about was optimism. I think, oftentimes we think about people being pessimists or being optimists, and you have it on the skills side, which is interesting to me. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Dave. A lot of people feel very intuitively, and it turns out accurately, that optimism is a little bit more hardwired. Right? We come into this world either a little bit more optimistic or pessimistic. And the one psychologist who's probably best known as a researcher in this field is Martin Seligman, who was the president of the American Psychological Association about the turn of the century. He's really credited for starting the, for starting the positive psychology movement. And what Martin Seligman says is that, oh yeah, optimism is pretty hardwired. He said, I was born a curmudgeon. But what he found through his research initiative was that there are interventions that you can use that will actually move the needle on optimism. So through attributional style interventions, we can actually help people become more optimistic. So your intuition is absolutely right there, Dave. And it really, this one might straddle both, but we put it in the skill scales because we feel a little bit more confident that we can help people intentionally move the needle on this than the dimensions on the personality side.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I want to ask if you have more questions, but I also want this to be personal to you, and I want to engage you in a reflection, okay? So we have already posted in the chat a couple times, and Sue did it just a few minutes ago, a one-page document that lists the 14 scales and their definitions. Oh, and just really quickly, the reason interpersonal sensitivity is italicized is because it is the only one of those 14 dimensions on which entrepreneurs rated themselves lower than corporate leaders. And we could talk about that for another half an hour, but in the interest of time, we won't. But that's why that's italicized. It's the only one in which entrepreneurs rate themselves as lower. So I would love you to just take a couple minutes to do this. And I know we're going to start Q&A a little bit later than we had thought at Sue, but hopefully it's okay since we're incorporating questions into this.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'd like each one of you to write down in a single sentence your most important professional or academic goal or challenge right now. It might have been different last week. It might be different a month from now. But what is kind of top of mind for you as a professional, or for those of you who are still in school, academic goal or challenge? So maybe it's grow my business. Maybe it is find a position that better takes advantage of my strengths. Maybe it is figuring out how to coach my direct reports more effectively. Whatever it is, an academic or a professional or academic goal or challenge that feels really important to you right now. And then second, I'd like you to look at all 14 scales and identify the 4 that feel most important for you to demonstrate in order to successfully meet this goal or challenge. So a couple things. I don't want you to think about where you actually are high or low. Try to take that out of the equation and just say which 4 are most important for you to demonstrate, whether you really have that personality characteristic or not in your mind, or whether you are or not good at something. What do you think are the 4 scales that represent the behaviors that you most need to demonstrate in order to successfully meet the goal or challenge? So in case you, I'm just going to leave this here and give you a couple minutes. Okay, even if you're still working, I'm going to move to the next direction so you can take a look at this. Those are just I should have left that up. But okay, now what I want you to do is, putting aside what's most important for you to meet that challenge, is to select the 3 scales out of all 14 that you predict you would score highest on. And then choose the 3 that you predict you would score the lowest on. And if you have printed out that form, you can write an H next to the ones that you think would be high and an L next to the ones that you think would be low. If you haven't printed it out, you can just jot those down. So the first exercise was thinking about which of those scales represented behaviors that would be most important for you to demonstrate. And now you're predicting where you would actually score high and low. And they don't have to be, 2 from personality, 2 from skills, that they can be from anywhere in the list that feel most accurate to you. Okay, and if you need to take a screenshot of this, please do, because I'm going to stop sharing in a moment. Because here's the question I'm really going to ask each one of you to reflect on. And that is, when you kind of cross-reference or you compare what you said was most important for you to meet your current challenges and where you predicted you would actually score high and low, what do you notice? And I think we're not going to have time, although I'd like to. It's Sub and Melissa. Are you comfortable if we put people in small groups just for 5 minutes? Because I bet they really want to talk to each other.
Definitely.
Yeah? Okay. All right. So
do you want to
what
make a breakout group?
I'm sorry?
Breakout groups, like divide them into breakout groups?
Yeah, in just 1 minute. I want to give them the instructions first, and then you can put them in groups of maybe 3 at Zoom.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, great. So here's what I want you to do. When you compare your predicted high and low scores versus what you think you need to be doing in order to successfully meet your goal or challenge, what do you notice? And you don't have to be this structured about it, but please do go ahead and take a screenshot. You're not going to get too far in 5 minutes. But after you introduce yourself, just really briefly, I'd love for each one of you to know, were there any of the scales that you chose as among the 4 most important that also are predicted high scores for you? So for example, I might say, oh gosh, to meet my goal, I really felt like I had to be high in action orientation, and I was. So that's good news. That's something to celebrate. But if you have time, I'd like you to go to the next question, which is, were there any skills that you thought were really important for your success, but you predicted they'd be low? So for example, I might say, oh, I thought idea generation was important in order for me to meet this next challenge, but I don't think I scored very high on it. Okay? And then if you have time, you can talk about one actionable takeaway. So you're going to have to go pretty quickly and really share airtime but it's more fun when it's interactive, and I want you to think about the implications of these scores for you. So at Sub, please put people into groups of 3, and we'll bring you back in 5 minutes and have a nice conversations with each other. Who, just really quickly, who would like to share one, and I know you're just predicting your scores, you haven't taken the assessments, but who wants to share one takeaway for you based on what's important to you and where you think you would score high or low? Just one of you. If we had more time, I'd ask for a lot, but who wants to share an actionable implication? Is it that no one had any? Oh, there you go. Okay, Shauna, you're up.
Hi. So I'm planning, I just got my doctorate in physical therapy. I'm now licensed. So I am planning on starting my own practice. And the way I rated myself was that the things that I thought were really important to starting my own practice don't necessarily correlate at all to the things that I think that I would score high in or low in. They were all different for me. So what I think starting a practice is, I guess maybe I put that outside of my own self.
Mm-hmm.
And me, who I think I am, is better at different things, but those things in my brain aren't correlated.
Okay, really interesting. So yeah, so if as long as you're high on some things, you know, what you can, and we're all relatively high on some things and relatively low on others, but you can think about, how do I leverage those? And maybe they weren't the ways you thought you would get there to starting a successful practice, but maybe they can be leveraged nonetheless. That's one of the reasons I like using this, is helping people see things that they didn't see before that will allow them to be successful. Okay, so thank you for sharing that, and congrats on your PhD, and good luck with starting your business. That's so exciting. I am just going to go through the rest of my slides really, really quickly, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all. Okay, so I'll show you just a couple pages of the assessments. Unlike a lot of assessments where you'll see a standardized score that will show you where you are compared to the norm group, this one actually shows you with the red line what your scores were, your raw scores on a 5-point scale on each of the dimensions relative to the entrepreneur norm group, represented by the green line, and the corporate manager norm group, represented by the blue line. So again, we're not saying this is ideal or everyone should be here, even if you're going to be an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. We're just saying this is where entrepreneurs are, this is where corporate managers are. Where are you relatively high or low? And what are the implications for that? Unlike a lot of assessments, we will even show you exactly what the items were in every scale and how you responded, and how that compares to how the two norm groups responded. I know there's not a lot of time. Here's the skills page. This person, for example, happens to be very low in execution, high on a lot of the others. We don't look at it as right or wrong, good or bad. We just say, okay, well, how does that play out for you? What are the implications? What does this mean for what you might need to change or modify or leverage to be really successful, as however you define that? And on the last page, there are links to a video to help you debrief it if you don't work with a certified practitioner. And then there's also a development guide, which has a lot of information about each scale and how you would, and we find this is especially helpful in college and university settings, how you would actually go about trying to move the needle on something, developing something. And we have that advice, that information, those resources, not only for the skill scales, but also for the personality scales, even though we think it's a little bit harder to move the needle on those. So when you want to address a low score, what do? One thing you could do is say, oh, okay, that's low and no problem. To your point, Scott, let's say I'm low on nonconformity. Well, if my business doesn't really require me to be unique, different, even eccentric, no big deal. I can just forget about it. I decide, as the person taking the assessment, I decide what's important, right? Not anyone else. So I could decide, oh, that's true and it's not important. If I'm low on something important, like let's say idea generation, I think is important for me to be successful. If I'm not great at it and I have the option, I could team up with someone who I think is really good at that. And we can do that inside or outside of corporate, organizations or startups, or our own, mom and pop or lifestyle businesses. So teaming with someone with complementary strengths is a great way to have the benefit of a skill set without doing all the hard work of developing it ourselves. We can if we have to, but if we don't have to, that's just nicer. And how to leverage your high scores. Well, I believe personally that everybody has strengths in entrepreneurial thought and action, that all of us have the entrepreneurial spirit available to us, but sometimes we don't think of ourselves in that way, or we don't have a role model. And so that one of the not goals or jobs, but one of the biggest gifts that educators and mentors and coaches can give to people, young people or not so young people, is to help them recognize that in themselves and really bring it to life, really ignite that. So again, there's no ideal profile. It all depends on your context and what you think you need in order to be successful as you define that in whatever context you like. Couple quick stats about the EMP. It's been on the market for about 5 to 6 years now, I believe. 28,000 plus people have completed it. We have 500 plus certified practitioners around the world, 38 countries, over our 6 languages, and it's used in a lot of colleges and universities in entrepreneurship courses. Interestingly, and this happens with almost every new product or service, we didn't create the EMP for college and university students, but it turns out that there's a big market there. So we created it for leadership development consultants and coaches to give to leaders who wanted to develop or identify, leverage entrepreneurial mindset, and plenty of folks like me do use it in that way, but we have a lot of university professors and counselors who use it with their students. Okay, so if you have any more questions, please contact me. You can actually go online if you're interested, take the EMP yourself. Most assessments don't allow you to do that, but you can do that because there's resources online, or you can go through a certified practitioner. And thank you for being here today. And we have 4 minutes for Q&A or whatever else you want to do at Zoom.
Definitely. Like I can give one person like a chance to ask a question because we don't have much time. So if anyone who's like first come, first serve, anyone who has a question first.
Hi, Jen. I have a question.
Sure.
What tip would you give to an up-and-coming entrepreneur who's big on idea generation but not so big on execution?
So so as a coach, it's maybe a professional liability. I don't ever give advice without asking about a million questions first to better understand their context, their history, or experience. But if they thought that execution was also important, as it almost always is, Kirti, right? Everyone's an idea person, but until you put it into action or actually create something from it, it's not that valuable. I would ask them who they knew who was really good at execution, who might already be on the team or available to them and like their informal board of advisors, or better yet, a partner. So that would be, I think, my first hope for them, is that there's someone else who's really good at it. Otherwise, I would suggest that they think about what they have to do to develop that.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome. I'm glad.
One last quick question. We have like 3 minutes.
So we could have 3 quick questions. No, you have to announce. You have to announce. Yeah, okay. Sorry, we have 1 quick question. All right, well, if you have any non-quick questions or follow-ups, let me know. But thank you for Melissa for saying, there'll be, oh yeah, you can I'll definitely share the deck with you, Melissa. You can share it with everybody.
Definitely. Also, like Jen already put her email address in the chat. So if you have any question, even after this, just like drop her an email. So yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for your presentation, time, and all for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking your time to be here with us for the event today. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and like be active, like in the last minute, 3 minutes Q&A session. And please look at our post-event survey in an email tomorrow. Also, please join the Trinity Entrepreneur Network and complete your profile in the Bantam Career Network, and follow up with Melissa if you have any additional if you have any question or if you want any additional information. Melissa's email is in the chat, Jen's email is in the chat, and thank you so much for joining us today. Like June 15th, another reminder, we have another roundtable. So I hope I'll see you all there. Thank you.